We are the Childhood Collective, and we have helped thousands of overwhelmed parents find joy and confidence in raising their child with ADHD. I'm Katie, a speech-language pathologist.
And I'm Lori.
And I'm Mallory, and we're both child psychologists. We combine the science of ADHD with the compassion of moms and bring you practical tools you can start using today.
So hit subscribe and let's help your family shine with ADHD.
Today I'm here with Lori and Mallory to talk all about homework. So, ladies, let me ask you, do you dread homework as much as your kids?
Yes, I do. I hated homework as a kid, and I hate it just as much as a parent.
Totally. And the last thing that my kids want to do, the last thing that I want to do after a long day of school, after a long day of work, is come home and do more work. And add ADHD into the mix. ADHD and homework just is a big challenge. So we know for you listeners that homework is probably not your favorite part of the day.
It's so true. And so today what we're going to do is we're actually just going to focus on a really small but really important part of the homework process. Today we're just talking about setting up your child's space for doing homework.
So the homework space is something that's frequently overlooked by families, but we want to tell you don't overlook this part. Taking the time right now to set up a homework space can save you and your child lots of tears and frustration in the future.
Absolutely. And if you're feeling kind of lost or unsure about how to create a space to best support your child with ADHD, do not worry. We have you covered, of course. And today we're going to be sharing our 4 tips to help make homework easier for both you and your child.
I love it. So I'm going to be implementing all of these tips. The first tip that we love to talk about is making sure that you involve your child in the process. And I know we say this all the time, but truly this is one of the biggest predictors of how successful any system is going to be, is if you have your child's buy-in. And it's so important because especially for kids with ADHD, they really notice when the grownups are doing things for them instead of doing them together, right? And figuring it out together. And we really don't want to get to the point where our kids are resistant to us helping. And that can often happen when they feel like they don't have control. They don't have any power in their little power bucket. So how do we get our kids buy-in? How do we involve them in the process? So there's a lot of different ways that this can look. It's going to depend on your own child. But I like to think about, like, if a child was really interested in something like art, you could have them make some art for their space, and you can make it really special. You can go to the dollar store and buy some picture frames and frame their artwork and hang it up. In my kids' playroom, I let them decide which art goes on the wall and then where it goes. It's like the only room in the house where they get to decide how high up the picture is. And it's great because that's their space. Thinking about another type of kid, maybe someone who really needs a lot of like fidgets or movement, you might ask them, okay, what kind of fidgets do we want to have in our space? And instead of having 20 different fidgets, you can have them pick their favorite 2 or 3 and put them in a drawer. Another simple one is I'll help my kids. They have a little desk for homework, and I might say, okay, here's the flashcards that we're going to need. We are very much in like the drill and kill phase with my kids with flashcards. Yep. My son is doing, basic numbers and early addition. My daughter is into like the multiplication. And so I'll say, okay, these are the flashcards we need. How should we organize these flashcards? And it's just a small thing because they're all going in the drawer, but by letting them decide, these boxes are going to go in rainbow order, or, my son's on one side, my daughter's on the other, and then they make a whole plan like, okay, when I'm done with this box, we're going to move it over to your side because he's going to need them eventually. So it's just really neat to see that and that problem solving. And when we think about our kids being more and more independent, that's always the goal, to help them become independent. And we want them to be thinking about what they personally need. So this is just a great way to help them become more independent and advocating for themselves. And I will say, you probably need to put some parameters around this. So
you can, if your child asks to watch Bluey while they do their homework, you wouldn't let them?
I mean, right? Or like I'm going to paint my entire desk purple and glitter, and It's like, oh man, all right, let's get out the glitter and we're going to paint a purple picture that's going to go on the corner of the desk. But it is finding the balance as a mom or a dad of, allowing them to make those choices within reason and hopefully not like destroying the furniture unless you're cool with that.
And getting their involvement too, you might learn some subtle preferences. So just to give you an example of something that's happened in my house is a homework space could be like at our kitchen counter or it could be at our kitchen table. But I've learned, and my son let me know, that he actually prefers to use the kitchen table because I think it's a sensory thing. He likes the feeling of writing on the material that our kitchen table is made out of versus the countertop material. It just feels better for whatever reason, or it's smoother. And so by getting his input about, we could sit here and do this, we could sit here and do this, he was able to tell me, like, I actually like to sit at the kitchen table better because for whatever reason, he likes the feeling of writing on that countertop or tabletop more than the other. So when you get your child involved in the process, you might learn subtle little quirks like that again, you're like getting their buy-in, and then they've been able to say their piece, and just makes it more likely that they're going to utilize that space and have homework go a little smoother.
Yeah. So our second tip is to find a quiet space in your house. I remember this was probably a decade ago where I was doing a home observation of a little girl with ADHD, and her mom I was doing therapy with her, and her mom was really struggling with homework time. And she asked me to go to their house because she needed tips. And I was like, well, it's really hard for me to know like how to help you if I can't see what's going on in the house. So she was like, oh yeah, come over and you can kind of see what's going on and you can give us some help.
You have a line of parents now, Lori, that want you to come to their house and watch homework.
I know. I don't do that anymore. Unfortunately, it was a decade ago. But this was just a really awesome family. And I went over there, and as she's sitting at the kitchen counter doing homework, and I think many of you families out there listening are going to be saying, yeah, that's where we usually do homework. The mom was like cooking dinner. She had another kiddo that was in there playing on the floor, banging stuff. The TV was on, and she kept asking her daughter questions about her school day or other stuff that was going on. And the daughter was out of her seat, talking, chatting. And again, there were just like a lot of distractions. So that was kind of like the first thing that we talked about was how do we minimize like those distractions in that setting and find a quiet space. I'm not a super organized person. Mallory and Katie know this about me.
No.
So I'm probably not the person to be talking about this. But I'm probably similar to a lot of families out there that I'm not super organized. I'm not super crafty and artsy. Like my kids, we have a really small house, and the only spare room we have is like an office for my husband and I to work. And there really isn't extra space to like have desk space in their bedroom. Their bedrooms are tiny. So we really have to do homework in the kitchen, honestly. But the way I kind of get around that and minimizing distractions is keep the TV off. That should never be on. So if you have younger kids, and I know that that's true for many of you, I know many families will come in and be like, well, the younger kid is like watching TV while I'm doing homework with this one, but they can hear what's going on the TV.
So distracting.
And so they're up out of it's so distracting, and they are getting up out of their seat to see what's on the TV and what show they're watching. So, if there's any way to minimize that, even, if your child needs to be on something, get an iPad and headphones or something, or have them go in another room, just so that they're not hearing that distraction. Other things you can do, again, trying not to do it at a time of the day when you're cooking dinner. So like we try and do a small break after school, and then we start on homework before I start making dinner. Because if I'm making dinner and trying to go over there and help them, it's just like chaos and it's noisy, and it just has never worked for us. Other things to think about are, other siblings. So if you do, I definitely have another child who's also trying to do homework, and they rile each other up. Like they will be laughing and being silly after school. And so there are definitely times where I have to separate them because they're just feeding off of each other.
I do something similar with my kids because we have, our kitchen is kind of like an open concept with our dining room. And then we actually have a desk in the corner. And if they're both sitting at the counter, inevitably it becomes, stop touching my stool. You took my pencil.
Yes.
That's my eraser. And it's unbelievable. Truly. I'm like, how is this a fight? You're just sitting next to each other for 15 minutes, but it really helps even within the space to just give them some separation. So we have 4 bar stools, and I'll put like one at one end and one at the other, or pull one over to the dining room or over to the desk. That's actually one of the ways that my kids make choices too. Like I'll say, where do you want to sit? And then they can't choose to sit right next to each other. That's the only rule because they really distract each other.
Yeah. And parents are going to have to find out what works best for their child. But another thing that we generally recommend is somewhere where you're going to be able to closely monitor them. So if you do have 2 kids and you're separating them, choose wisely who's the one closer to you, the one who might need a little bit more redirection or maybe a little bit more support with the homework. In my experience, it hasn't been successful for a lot of families raising kids with ADHD to have their child do their homework in their bedroom where the parent comes in an hour later and, oh my gosh, nothing is done.
Yep.
Especially if your child keeps all their toys and things in their bedroom. So also think critically about, how much help and supervision are they going to need, and make sure that it's a place that's easily accessible to you where you're able to check in frequently.
I know Lori and I have our kids in really similar school programs, and our school is really like parent intensive. Like my kids can't just sit there and do copy work. Like I have to read their spelling words to them and things like that. And it is, it becomes like a full family project. So for us, it does work best to have them nearby. But even that is stressful because I have like one kid who's just learning how to read and can't even read, all the pieces of his math workbook. So I'm having to read those instructions and then pop over and do 2 spelling words for the 3rd grader. So it's just this kind of like back and forth that it is a lot. And even as a parent, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much executive functioning. So I do something similar to Lori. I don't try to cook a lot of times while we're doing homework because I would get really frustrated and angry. Like it's going to burn because I'm so distracted by my kids. And then that's right when the dog needs to eat. I don't know what's up with the dog. It's just a lot. It's a lot.
I mean,
parents.
if I'm being really honest, I'm really never the one cooking in the kitchen. It's really my husband. Like, I don't want my husband making a bunch of noise and distracting the kids. I hate cooking and I avoid it, and he does most of the cooking. But
oh my gosh, I'm coming to your house.
But I think Mallory makes a great point. And one thing we talk about with sleep hygiene is, if your kids have trouble sleeping, we try and really keep bedrooms like for sleeping and sleeping alone. And we see so many middle schoolers and teens going into their bedroom for long hours, really, like Mal said, not getting any of their homework done, distracted. And then it becomes a battle and there's just not enough supervision around that. So that's such an important point. If you are in a situation like me where you have a small house, you want supervision, so they sort of have to do it like in the kitchen area. Another way to limit those distractions that many of the families that we work have found helpful is using earplugs or headphones. And we can put some links in the show notes for a couple that we recommend. But those are really helpful at school too for your kids. You can get earplugs for kids that are, again, not going to stand out. So a lot of kids don't want to be wearing headphones, in the classroom, and they're the only ones in there wearing them. So there are lots of great options out there. And I know some kids can be resistant. So giving them choices about what they think would work best is really helpful too. So we'll put links in the show notes for a couple that we like. Over the past year, my oldest has really struggled with anxiety, especially at night. As soon as it was time for sleep, she'd be crying for me to stay and worrying about all the things. I was talking to another therapist about our bedtime battles, and she said the Zenimal, a screen-free meditation device, had been a game changer for her daughter with ADHD and anxiety. I immediately purchased the Zenimal and can confidently say it was the best tool to help my daughter get better sleep. She was able to fall asleep an hour earlier using it.
Yes, it's actually really helped my kids to be able to calm their busy bodies at night.
What we love about the Zenimal is that it combines two of our favorite bedtime recommendations, using a relaxation strategy and removing screens from the bedroom.
The Zenimal is an adorable screen-free turtle with 9 guided meditations your kids can choose from. And our absolute favorite part of the Zenimal is that every meditation ends with the most important message: you're a good kid.
To grab your own Zenimal and get your child and yourself some better sleep, head to zenimals.com and use our code TCC for a discount. You can also find the link in the show notes.
The next thing you want to do in our third tip here is to get all the supplies ready. It kind of sounds obvious and straightforward, but it's really important, especially for our kids with ADHD, that when they sit down and they get started on their homework, that they have all the things that they need to complete that task in their area ready to go. Again, if they're constantly having to get out of their seat to go grab the crayons, to grab the markers, to grab the scissors from across the room, to grab the book that they're reading from their bedroom, all of these things are kind of pulling them off task, and then we have to get them restarted in the task again. And that's really hard for ADHD brains. So to the extent possible, having kind of those supplies that you use regularly for homework right there in the homework space available. If you have a small house like Lori and you can't, keep all of those supplies right on the countertop, because that's also where you eat dinner or you spend, you do other things, have them kind of collected in a way that you can bring them all out together when it is time to do homework. Another strategy that we always recommend families use is to pre-screen your child's homework for the day and make sure that everything that your child needs to complete that particular assignment or task is available. So maybe your child doesn't need scissors every day, but today they do need scissors. Making sure that you have that available and ready to go for them is just going to limit and keep down the amount of time it takes them to do homework, because they're having to get pulled away from the actual task less and less.
And along those same lines, this is such an important way to build executive functioning. And I used to do speech therapy all the time with families. The parents would come in, because for ADHD, you really need that parent training component. And we would break down a task like baking cupcakes. And what's step 1 of baking cupcakes? And every kid is like, you just put everything in the bowl. And that is a surefire way to get halfway through the bowl and then be like, oh my gosh, we're out of eggs, right? So step 1 is to figure out, what do I need in order to get this task done? And that is an executive functioning skill that our kids are growing. They don't necessarily have that skill on their own. We have to teach them. So before I start, I have a future picture in my mind. What is my final project or my end of homework going to look like? If it has color, if it's cut or glued or taped, okay, that's a quick prompt. Like, what do I need in order to do this assignment?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really great way for you. That's super functional. You're not making up, like me with my cupcake example. I'm like, pretend we're making cupcakes. No, this is actually something that they're going to have a finished product, and then they can compare what they did to what their future picture looked like, right, in their mind. And so definitely with, for example, like the scissors example, you might look at the homework with your child, and you obviously know they need scissors, but you're going to talk through that. Okay, so what is it going to look like when it's done? Oh, it's going to be cut into star shapes. Oh man, what are we going to need? And you can start to problem solve out loud with them, because again, that's just an awesome, very natural way to build that executive functioning into your child's day.
Absolutely. I love kind of all these subtle ways that we can grow our child's executive function, because we get questions from parents all the time who are kind of like, what activities can I do with my child to grow their executive function? And the truth of the matter is that there's already hundreds of opportunities built in throughout our day to do that. And this is one great way to do it. And at first, they're going to need more of your help, but then of course, they're going to become more independent as you kind of scaffold that skill over time. They're going to be able to do that by themselves. Another thing to think about in terms of outside of just like standard school supplies that you might want to think about is your child using something in the classroom that helps them with focus? Things like a subtle fidget, a wiggle seat. Can you get those items to use at home as well? And again, this is important in getting your child involved, getting their thoughts on, what helps you focus at school. Let's set those same conditions up at home. If your child doesn't use any of those things at school or at home, but you think they might benefit them, but you're not sure whether to ask for it or what to even ask for, we have a free guide called School Accommodations for Kids with ADHD. We'll link that in the show notes, but that has a lot of ideas that you can look through that will give you ideas of things that you could ask for your child at school. But also all of those ideas are going to be helpful at home too when you think about doing homework. So if you don't already have that free school accommodations guide, definitely grab that because that might have some great ideas for you in terms of how to make homework go a little bit smoother at home. And, just home organization in general is going to help ADHD brains. And again, like having all of those school supplies, homework supplies in one place ready to go, whether it stays in the homework space or not, is going to be so important. And Katie has this awesome caddy that kind of keeps it all together.
Yeah,
I think
I
I need to
do.
get it now that I think about it. But we think you probably need it too. So we'll link it in the show notes. But just, paying attention to how you can keep these supplies organized and readily available for your child.
Yeah. And I'm not the organized person. So I'll represent all the moms out there or dads that are like, having a caddy and keeping it organized is like not for them. But we just honestly have a drawer in our kitchen and we have a pencil sharpener set up. And so like those things are there. So it's just easy for them to access too. So that's an option.
I think it's such a common experience where people are like, oh my gosh, you want me to organize this, whether it's keeping everything in a drawer or putting it in an art caddy. And there's this,
Yep.
at least for me, this immediate feeling of like overwhelm, like, oh my
Yep.
gosh, one more thing. But the truth is, and I can tell you this, like tried and true, there are so many people in my family that have ADHD, and we have taken the time to set up systems for every single part of our day. And it is hard for me. It is a struggle. But when you put in the effort at the beginning, it really does make a difference. Like my kids now know where the scissors go. And that cuts down so much on them asking me 8 bajillion times, where are the scissors? Or me going, who took my scissors? Because they know where their scissors are and they go back to the same spot. And it takes a lot of teaching at the beginning, but it really long-term, it's like an investment and it really does pay off. And I can say with all honesty, like it's worth it, even if you feel totally overwhelmed at the thought. It's a little bit of work on the front end. I'll call it a lot of work, but it can really pay off in the long run. So our fourth and final tip is using what we love so much is using a timer. And we love visual timers because a lot of times when you have a timer that just counts down digitally or even a clock that's digital, kids are not understanding the passage of time. And with ADHD, we have a lot of time blindness. When you get into an activity and you don't know, was it 10 minutes or 2 hours, that feeling of time passing, it's just not there. And so this is part, again, of the executive functions, but the time timer is one example, and we all use it in our own homes. We like it's the time timer mod. Mod, because it's small and it has different colors. So we all have like our own color schemes in our houses and we matched it to our kitchen and they're just nice. But the nice thing about the time timer is if you haven't seen one, it's a clock, but then you set it and the red part covers up that much time. So if it's 20 minutes, you're going to set the timer with the red part covering 20 minutes and then it ticks backwards. And so I use it all the time with my own kids for a lot of different things. I use it as a countdown, like we're going to work for this many minutes. And when the red is gone, the timer dings, we're going to take a break. I also will use it on breaks to get them back to what they're going to do. And my kids love to set the timer. An example that's not homework related is the shower. My kids don't always want to get in the shower, but once they're in, it's very hard to get them out. And so the time timer has made a big difference. Like my son will take his time timer, it's amazing, into the bathroom, and we have a glass, door so he can see it. It stays on the counter and he can set it. And, again, he would set it for like 30 minutes if he could, but it's a recession and a drought. Like we're not doing that. So we're just like, okay, you get, 7 minutes, and he can keep an eye on the time. So again, we love the time timer. If you've been listening to the podcast for any amount of time, you know that we have an affiliate program with them. So you can actually save 5% if you buy anything from Time Timer. Just use our code, which is TCC. Anytime we can externalize time for our kids, that's a really helpful tool.
Yeah. So these tips that we've shared with you today are really foundational in a sense that they're important to homework success for kids with ADHD and really all kids. But we know that for some of you, like having a good homework space is just not enough. We know that homework can be really challenging for kids with ADHD, regardless of what kind of the homework space looks like at home.
Yep. And if you find yourself in situations where your kids are really melting down when you ask them to read, or you spend hours sitting at the table only to get one word on a piece of paper, and it's just such a huge fight, we would really encourage you to dig deeper with that, either with a psychologist or with your school, get an evaluation and look at accommodations or interventions that they might need. I just work with so many families that come in saying, we're spending hours, there's tears, there's meltdowns. In every case, there's usually some type of learning challenge or something like that has not been addressed yet.
And when you say that, Lori, you mean like dyslexia?
Dyslexia or dysgraphia or just learning disorders in reading, writing, or math that, again, I was just talking with a teacher yesterday, and this poor girl is so smart. They did testing with her, so smart. And I go into her classroom and she's, she can't do basic math at a high level. And they're not putting those pieces together, and it's interpreted by the teacher as she's not a motivated learner. That's what she said to me. And it breaks my heart because these kids are so misunderstood. So if you're seeing those battles over academic tasks in particular, we'd really encourage you to dig deeper. Again, we go into how to get those evaluations and supports at school to dig deeper in our online course, Shining at School. But if you're really in a situation where homework is a huge battle, there's probably something more going on that you need to look at.
And as parents, we want to just remind you, your relationship with your child is so important, and their connection to you and their trust in you. And so I get that pressure as a mom. I want my kid to finish their homework. I want them to look like they have it together. But knowing at your deepest heart of hearts that you being there for your child and preserving that relationship is more important. So don't sacrifice the relationship to get the homework done, if that makes sense. Reach out and get help, talk to the teacher, let them know how hard it is, because you're their person and you don't want homework to start to damage that.
And even if it is just ADHD and there aren't learning challenges, there are accommodations that can help you, including modifying the work to, change what is coming home to them, or it could be just limiting the amount of homework. So maybe the whole class does all the problems 1 through 20, but your child does even numbers. So there are ways to accommodate that for your child so that they're still learning, getting practice, but they're not overwhelmed.
Absolutely. And something we see happening a lot for kids with ADHD is they're not finishing tasks in class. So then that gets sent home in addition to homework.
That's me. I'm in that boat. And it's been really frustrating at times, but yes.
Yes. So these are important things that, that you should be talking with your child's teacher about, that potentially we can modify to help homework go a little bit smoother.
Yep. So a key takeaway for this episode is putting in a little bit of work ahead of time to prepare your child's space for homework is so important to their success. And a little preparation can minimize their distractibility and increase your child's focus and ability to complete their homework quickly and independently. And most importantly, we want your child to have a positive homework experience and build their self-confidence.
Thanks for listening to Shining with ADHD by your hosts, Lori, Katie, and Mallory of the Childhood Collective.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like this video and hit subscribe so you can be the first to know when a new episode airs.
If you are looking for links and resources mentioned in this episode, you can always find those in the show notes. See you next time.